Welcome to another episode of Blue is the New White. Today I'm here with the great, the only Anthony Pacheco, who actually handles all of Windy City Equipment's benefits and insurance. And Anthony has from what I can tell, a wonderful story to tell. And I'm really excited to have him on the show today. Anthony, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us who you are, where you're from, who are you?
Hey, Josh, appreciate the introduction. Really excited to be here today, so thanks for inviting me on. Anthony Pacheco. I live in the West Valley of Phoenix. I moved here about 5 years ago from Dallas, Texas, specifically McKinney, Texas. I grew up in a little small farm town called Tom Bean, which is kind of funny. There's like 800 people in the town. And so... I've got 4 children, married. We're involved heavily in sports and education. My wife's a teacher, and so completely all in on kids and having fun. So
nice. All right, I think everybody's wondering, who are your teams? Football, baseball, hockey? Who you got?
Okay, so Dallas Cowboys, obviously for football. Go Cowboys. Obviously. If you're from Texas, especially the Dallas area, if you're not a Cowboys fan, I literally would have probably gotten killed as a kid. But it really helped that they were really, really good. And so I got to experience the era of, 3 Super Bowl championships, the Jimmy Johnson era, and, Aikman, Irvin, Emmett, all that group. So, yeah. Hockey would be the Dallas Stars, Rangers for baseball. I got to see Nolan Ryan pitch, which was amazing as a kid, and I got to see them build all the new stadiums. So, yeah, those are all my teams.
Very cool. So, what did you say the name of your hometown was again?
Tom Bean.
Tom Bean.
Yes.
Tom Bean. All right.
Yeah.
What's your favorite restaurant out there in your hometown?
Well, there are no restaurants in Tom Bean.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes. There's no stoplights. There's a blinking yellow light as you come through the main intersection of where downtown was. Now, I haven't been back there in probably 15 years, so I can't say if that's exactly how it stayed, but from my understanding, it's pretty similar. Still the same. There was a convenience store there that I managed at 17 while I was in high school. And it had a little grill and a pizza inn in it. And so...
mayor's office, barber shop.
Yeah, the whole thing, the whole shebang. There was Bud's Barber downtown whenever I was a kid. I think I got my hair cut a couple times by Bud. So...
Nice.
Yeah. And he owned the Rock Pit. So, that's the type of town. It was a farm town. Everybody was farmers.
Okay.
Except for us.
Grassroots. I like it.
Yeah.
Very cool. So... let me ask you, did you know about the trades when you were in high school, and what was your perception of them? Kind of what we talk about here.
Sure. So growing up, me and my dad and my family, we built about a 3,000 square foot house in Tom Bean. My dad played semi-pro baseball, and then got into the oil field, and then so he started working with his hands. He knew how to work with his hands, and then eventually just one thing led to the next with the economy of the 80s, and started working factory-type work, and then we started building our own house. He kind of bought some blueprints, designed them the way that he wanted them to look, drew it and architecturally, and then we built a house, literally. We had the concrete poured, we framed it, taped and bedded, drywalled it, sidinged it, the whole bit. And so we put in, everything you can think of. Plumbing, toilets, sinks, so pretty much built it from scratch. Built a barn, I grew up on a bulldozer, a tractor, straight up farm town. So, my closest neighbor was, a quarter mile away. We didn't hang out in the neighborhood to play football. I went and mowed the pasture. And so took a chainsaw and cut down limbs off of our pecan trees and things. So growing up in the industry didn't really happen for me like that. as much as it is just hands-on experience. And then whenever high school came around, my dad really started talking to me about plumbing, electricians. And so he said, the most wealthy people are going to be plumbers and electricians here in 20 years. And I was like, why? And he goes, well, nobody wants to do it. Everybody wants to go to college and go sit at a desk. He said, so you're going to see this huge industry push. And this was 1995-ish, around that time. And so at that point, he was working for a construction company building homes. And I believe it was either Ingle Homes or Newmark Homes. It was one of the large ones. And he worked his way up. He ended up becoming vice president. Just really successful, and launched his own construction company. I went into the restaurant industry. And so from my standpoint, I graduated high school. I got a scholarship to go anywhere I wanted from the Army Scholastic program. And so it was a academic/athlete scholarship. And so I went my freshman year. I went to my first class. I made it through the first class, and 9/11 hit.
Oh.
So, which is, another segue, but 9/11 hit my freshman year in college. I was sitting in a computer course of some sort. I don't remember what it was. I think it was a coding course. And the internet wouldn't work because so many people were watching the World Trade Centers get hit. And so I had no idea what that meant. Everybody, they canceled class for the day. I go back to my dorm room, what's going on? Nobody knows. And so I get in my car and I drive to the mall. The mall's closed. I didn't know why the mall was closed. I called my mom. I'm like, why is the mall closed? I said, are you not watching the news? I've been trying to get a hold of you. What's going on? Where are you at? Are you okay? I'm like, yeah. I had no idea what happened. And, it was just a terrorist situation. And so I never went back to college. That was September, and started working. I was working already at a country club, and commuting back and forth to school. And so yeah, that's pretty much my understanding. In high school, I know I kind of segued it off a little bit on that one, but trades, I knew about them. My dad was pushing hard. I got a scholarship. It's the reason why I went to college. But it just seemed like 13th grade to me.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
More memorization, show up to class. Just wasn't really my cup.
Regurgitate everything that you hear so people think that you're smart.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Okay, cool. Well, actually, so you've actually had a leg up, if you will, for quite some time, at least in this industry, kind of understanding the forward thinking that it sounds like your dad instilled in you. And he had that foresight to see where the industry was headed and to kind of predict, exactly what we're seeing today with more people, retiring than entering into the industry, driving the wages up, and obviously, as skilled tradesmen, tradespeople make a wonderful living.
Sure, absolutely.
So that's kind of cool. So what do you think is the most common perception? All right, you were lucky. You didn't. It sounds like you kind of had your own. You could see past that, right? But a lot of people these days, I don't think can. They have their own perceptions of what it means to be a tradesperson. So what do you think those perceptions are, and how do we change it?
Well, that's a big question. The perception, I believe, is twofold. Parenting is at the core of most of it, and it derives. Even the way that I think about it is because my dad, worked with his hands, and we worked with our hands growing up, and he talked about it to me. I know a lot of my friends didn't have that, and a lot of my friends were told you got to go to college to be successful, and so people really looked down upon anybody that didn't go to college, especially being in a small town. You're talking to 800 people. Everybody knows what you did every day of the week. You have a party, everybody knew by Monday, and the parents and the coaches. Got in trouble a couple times for that. But anyway, the perception was, you're not going to college. Okay. And so it was really shamed, it was the shaming effect. And so I think I went to college on the premise that, one, I had a scholarship, but two, more of a shaming approach. I mean, I had no idea what I wanted to do. My high school thesis was to own my own country club, and so, which was kind of funny. And I didn't need a college degree to do that, but nobody ever told me any different. I actually paid cash, so for my freshman year. So I got a scholarship, but it wasn't a full scholarship, and so the rest of the tuition was covered. My parents told me absolutely they would never pay for college. And that if we wanted to go, we could. My older sister got a scholarship for cross country and running, full paid. And so she had a full ride. And then I came along, and I was a football player with 2 blown out knees. And there was no scholarship coming my way on that. And so my academic one, gave me a partial scholarship. But yeah, I had to come up with the cash on that. And so my parents made too much money to qualify for financial aid. And so they said, you owe, $3,400 by the end of this first semester, or, you got to figure out what else to do. And so I was already working. I'd already saved up enough money working in high school. And so I wrote a check for it. And I thought about it as I wrote the check. And I was like, really? Do I want to do this? So I wrote the check. Anyway, and when I left and said I wasn't going to go back, it was, wow, that was such a waste of money, right? Such a waste of money. And I just know that how many kids are doing that today, but the bill's being footed by somebody else, or are, the banks, and they're going to be tied to the debt for the rest of their life. But another story. So anyway, I tend to get off topic a lot of times, so you might need to pull me back every now and then.
No,
so trade industries, perception of it. How do we change the trade industry perception? Just education. Education is it's not our schooling system. Education is much different than most people think about it. And if you look at the world today, I was listening to a podcast on the way over here, and it was talking about the generational differences. And today, a 7-year-old in America is probably more like a 7-year-old in India than they are a 65-year-old in America. And it's because of the platforms that we have with technology. And so if you really look at it, like, we're educating ourselves through technology. You've got YouTube. You've got all these different aspects. Like, if I need to know how to change something on my car, I YouTube it and look it up, and oh my goodness, I don't have to pay a mechanic to do this anymore. I think that you had mentioned in your book something about, I need to change the capacitor on my air conditioner. I can go do that myself and save a couple of grand, right? Or however much the number was. I'm probably off on the numbers. We can't change the perception. People are going to educate themselves. And I think everybody looks at this whole conglomerate of people and they say, how do we change 400 million people? Well, you don't. You don't need to change 400 million people. We need to change about 50,000 people. 50,000 people into the trade industry every year, or every 5 years, would make a huge difference, right? And so we don't need the entire population of America to change. We do need them to understand that it is a relevant industry to go into, and it should not be shamed upon. So I think that is it. And, if you go with Gary Vaynerchuk and what he says, just stop caring what people think. Right? If you stop caring what other people think, it's a lot easier.
Right.
So.
Do what's right for you,
Yeah.
And that's actually a great perspective. Because I talk a lot about changing the perception, and but you're absolutely right. You don't have to change everybody's perception. We need to change the perception of, a chunk of people a year to help saturate, this market back with talent, with the right talent, the techs, and get people interested in things like that. But it doesn't have to be a full sweep of the nation, for every single mind doesn't need to think that the skilled trades are, menial, low paid jobs.
Sure.
Just needs to be a chunk of people. So
yeah, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
Right.
I mean, you can't take it all on.
Does not sound appetizing. So you were once a manager for, I know, the country club, right? And then also for Brinker restaurants, right? Chili's.
Correct.
So tell me, what did you learn especially, this is a good question because you knew a lot about the trades beforehand from like a construction aspect and things like that. But what did you learn about the trades in those jobs that you didn't know before?
So my country club industry probably gave me a unique perspective. So private country club, North Dallas, it's about, 10 grand to become a member, $500 a month. You walk in the door. It doesn't get you anything. That just gets you in the door. And so we had a higher class clientele. There were some other country clubs that had a lot higher class of clientele. But so one thing that I learned managing there was, one, I didn't have a college degree, and I was making really good money at 19 years old. And so I looked at that and I go, why do I need to go to college and spend all of this money whenever I'm making, $90,000 a year in this industry? It just didn't make sense to me. And then I would see like the people dropping off food. And then I would see the guys that came in and worked on all of our hot equipment. Then our ACs would go down, all of these things. And I'm like, man, there's a real economy out here that's happening. And then you start to get to meet those members. And guess what they own? They own the companies that were working on our AC or delivering the food or insurance guys or and so or restaurant owners. And you just really started to see, okay, I'm not seeing any corporate employees that are, mid-level people that are just working on things that are members here. I'm seeing this other industry here. And so that's what really started making me tick a little bit on that. And then I got to work a lot more at the Chili's level because as a general manager, my bonus was tied to my managing operating profit. And
which includes R&M.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I'll let you know that whenever a tech came in my restaurant, I wanted to know what they were doing, what they were touching, how they could fix it, how could I keep them from coming back out, because everything I could do to keep up with maintenance and repairs and cleanliness, I did. And so I've heard, you guys talk about how, it's greasy and, things like that. My restaurant, you could eat off the floor. We were a tourist spot at our location in McKinney. Corporate office for Brinker is in Dallas. And so they would give out these corporate credit cards to all the corporate office employees and tell them to go to the restaurants and eat for free. And so you would constantly have different people in your restaurant looking around, eating, observing, and things like that. So, yeah, that was the I wanted to know every single thing because the more I could drive down my maintenance, the more profit that I would make. And when a line goes down on the middle of a Friday night, when you've got $10,000 going through your restaurant and a line out the door, people wanting to come in and eat. If a line goes down and you got to makeshift a line to keep things cold and going, it's chaos in the kitchen. And so the quality of food's not going to be as good, which affects my bonus as well, because then my guest satisfactions and everything. So, yeah, I had a real vested interest in knowing what was going on.
Interesting. So you actually had it sounds like a very unique perspective in both circumstances. I really like the country club one. You're surrounded by these quote unquote white collar people to find out that they own quote unquote blue collar companies.
Right.
It just it kind of validates what I've been talking about, which is nice. Thank you for the validation.
Sure. Even though I didn't mean to do that.
but it's neat, and it's the truth, and that's what I want to try to get across to everybody is, the kind of success that can be realized in this industry, obviously. Sure. So then, with that being said, what made you get into insurance and ultimately pivot towards the skilled trades, even though after talking to you, I think I might know the answer to that latter question.
Sure. So manager of the restaurant, 2006 hits. So I started at Brinker in 2006. So the economy crashes within, 6 months of working for this new place. I just left the country club industry. And when the economy crashed, everything kind of stopped around the nation as far as people eating out and things like that. Texas didn't experience it the same way everybody else did. They did for a small bubble, but people still were eating out. People were still buying homes. They were still building. And so restaurants were still happening, and as those people started to come in for jobs, one of the people that I ended up hiring, her husband, she was part-time, she was working in a corporate office, and they needed money to make ends meet because he had gotten let go of his job. And so he had started an insurance agency, and at the time I didn't know it, but he kept recruiting me. Every day he would come in and eat dinner, and he would sit in her section. She would serve him and his daughter, and he recruited, and finally he was like, dude, I don't think you understand like how you're missing out. You've got a gift of gab. You can talk to people. You know, this would be the great industry for you. And so, you know, he started taking me on trips, like, you know, pit passes at NASCAR and, you know, all these things. And I'm like, why are you giving me all these free trips, free golf tournaments, all this stuff? And he goes, this is what you get in the insurance industry. And I was like, okay, I kind of like some of this stuff. And so he's like, well, come check out a day with me. So I went and checked out a day with him, and he just kind of sat in an office all day. And I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. So I left. I was like, you know what? I'm going to look at that insurance thing again. So I went back in, kind of understood it. I was like, okay, I saw a real day. I wasn't really sitting in an office all day. It was out talking to people all day. And so I was like, I like talking to people all day. And that's kind of what got me into the insurance industry. So when I went into the insurance industry, again, I passed my test and started with them. The first place I went was restaurants because that's what I knew. So I went to all these restaurants asking them if they needed help with their insurance. And a delivery guy for Benny Keith came in to deliver to this restaurant while I was doing the the pitch with the owner or whatever. And I saw him and I go, that's it. Remember those HVAC guys? Remember those plumbers? Remember those electricians? All those guys that were members at the country club? I guarantee they have staff members that need insurance. And so that's whenever I started going down that direction. So I shifted all of my focus from restaurants, which were not as easy to talk to because everything's on fire in a restaurant 90% of the time, right?
Yeah.
And so, you couldn't get meetings to stick a lot of times. And so I started with an electrician company that I knew and electrical company that I knew and went in and pitched, what I had to offer. And so came in, built a pretty good book of plumbers, electricians, some HVAC and pharmaceutical, which is a tech industry as well. And so that's kind of how I got into the skilled trade look for insurance. So that was back in 2010 in Dallas. So
full circle.
Yep.
I like it.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So two things in life are certain, right?
Yeah.
Death and taxes.
Always.
Yep. And, I often group insurance into that mix too. Tell our listeners why you think I do that.
So, death and taxes. There's two things that are the same about that. They're certain, right? They're always going to be there. Death and taxes are always going to be there. And, insurance is lumped into that because you have to have it these days. A lot of people don't understand how insurance was actually designed. Insurance was actually designed for little villages. Little villages came together and would put money together because if somebody's home got wiped out or a flood came and wiped out somebody's crop, the group would come together and help that family not die. And so that's how insurance actually started. And so as you go through and what insurance is today, which is not really insurance, especially in the health insurance world, a little more on the P&C side, but the health insurance world, it's not really insurance anymore. And it's a certainty that you got to have it. Because if you break your leg and you have to go to the hospital to have a surgery, you have no idea how to navigate that system from a cash pay patient. And so there's a lot of things that are changing in the industry that are going to help with that. But as we are right now and how it's been over the past 30 to 40 years, they hand out a company credit card to all the employees and say, here, go take care of your medical expenses with it. And essentially, that's what you're doing when you have a group health plan. You're handing your corporate credit card to your employees and saying, we trust you, we trust your doctor, we trust what the hospital is that you're going to go to. Here's our corporate card with an unlimited checking account. Go give it to whoever you want. And that's just crazy to me. If you really think about it, that's pretty crazy. You would never hand them your GL, your general funds corporate credit card, but we do it on the health insurance side every day. And so, death and taxes are certain. Insurance, it's certain. You're going to have it. You gotta protect your assets because people are driving around without insurance. Crazy people driving on the road. I mean, golly, it took me 2 hours to get here today. And so it's definitely certain, and it's definitely going to be used.
Yeah,
You
especially
never know.
in the skilled trades, right? I mean, I shouldn't say especially in the skilled trades, but in the skilled trades, I think it's looked at a little bit closer. Am I right or wrong on that?
Everybody's looking at insurance these days, and it's mainly because somebody's on a prescription, right, that they have to get filled, and they can't get it filled without this type of insurance, or they have a specific doctor that they want to go see. And so in the skilled trade industry, I don't see it as much in the tech world, but their families. So they're providing a good living for their families, and then their children and their spouse tend to have to use that benefit. A little bit with the baby boomer population, just because, and again, this is a generational thing. They have their doctors. They're set with their doctors. They don't want to go to a different doctor. A Gen Y doesn't care as much. I'll use Teledoc. I'll talk to my doctor through my telephone if they'll call me in a prescription and not make me go to their office. I hate going to doctor's offices. Literally, I hate it. I went to my doctor the other day for the first time. They didn't even know who I was, except for I had my kids that had come in. They're like, "Wow, it's been 5 years since we've seen you." Yeah, I haven't been here in 5 years. And then I unloaded like 6 problems that I was having. Hey, what about this? Can you check this out? And my doctor literally looked at me and he goes, people like you are the reason why I get behind in my day. And I was like, well, I get it all done in 5 years worth. I'm saving those timestamps for you. So
it's so funny that you say that because literally the same exact thing just happened to me. I went to the doctor a few weeks ago and, hey, doc, haven't been here in a while. You know what I realized when I was sitting in that waiting room? One of the worst things about doctor's offices, and this is completely off topic of anything that we're talking about, it's a realization that I had that because we're talking about this, I thought I should share. So I was at my doctor's office and I needed to use the restroom, which was in the lobby. And I discovered very quickly that once I walked into the restroom, although it looked clean, it was probably the most dirty, disgusting place in the whole world. And I had that realization while I was in there. And then I realized it's even worse because while you're in the bathroom, if you're there alone, you don't know if they call your name, right? So then you leave the bathroom and you're sitting there the whole time after you get out wondering if your name was called.
Right.
And then, you keep asking yourself, well, do I want to be that guy? Do I want to walk up to the counter and be like, hey, did you call my name? Is it my turn yet?
Right.
Anyway, so I had to share that. That's probably the biggest reason why I no longer go to the doctor's office and I use telemed.
It's funny. Funny thing, doctors actually will schedule you and tell you your appointment time is at 10 o'clock when your appointment time is really 10:20.
Really?
Yes. And it's because they know people show up late and still expect to be seen, and because they know that the way that medicine works this day is completely counteractive. But a doctor spends less than 15 minutes with a patient, right? And not to get completely off topic because we're talking about something else, but in the insurance world, it's really important. If your doctor hasn't seen you in 5 years and they only spend 15 minutes with you, do they really know what's going on with your body? Not a bit, right? And so if they have no idea what's going on with the patient and they've seen 200 other patients that day, they can't remember exactly who you are. They read your file as they walked in the door. And so you've got this really big problem there, right? So they're scheduling you at a time when they know they're not going to actually see you. So then you sit there for almost an hour waiting to go back. Then you go in, you see a doctor for less than 15 minutes, and you walk out and you're like, do I really know anything better about myself, right? So there's a big sweeping movement going across the nation called direct primary care, where employers are actually directly going to doctors' offices and contracting directly with them without insurance. And so the way that it works is, and there's hybrids to this, but a doctor will literally sit down and spend 45 minutes with a patient to know what's going on. And they're on board with every single thing that's going on, so that no longer do you have to have 7 different doctors for what's going on with you, where you go to all these different specialists, which is inflating cost, right? For the employee and the employer, the true payer, the employer. But it's that doctor gets a real feel with what's going on in your body because everybody's body is different. Medicine is not an exact science, right? It's a guesstimation. It's the best guess that we can do. Yeah, I can see this and I can see this. So yes, you have this. But a lot of the stuff that's going on, it's just your body and what you ate. Or
That's why they call it practicing medicine.
Practicing, correct. Yeah. So, just to segue a little bit off of that, but yeah, there's some interesting parts behind medicine in general.
That is interesting, and it's funny. We'll talk more about that after the podcast.
Okay.
Because that was basically my firsthand experience.
Oh.
Waited for an hour, saw a doctor for 10 minutes,
course.
left. So we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
But
which is why our generation loves telemedicine.
yeah,
We love it.
Absolutely.
It's real quick. I get a doctor on the phone. I'm talking to a doctor. I'm looking right at him, showing my tongue. My kid had, what was it called? Strep throat. They looked at the back of his throat. He goes, yeah, looks like strep throat. Called me in a deal. I didn't have a copay, and it got directly there and never had to leave my house.
when does the Alexa skill come out, right?
Right, exactly.
Hey, Doc.
I guarantee they're working on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure. All right, so you often voice your advocacy for the trades on LinkedIn. You're obviously passionate about the industry. In a nutshell, why are you so passionate? I know we talked a lot about it, but just to clarify everything for our listeners, what is it that you're so passionate about within this industry?
Sure. Again, I grew up around it. A lot of people don't know my backstory, but when you grow up working with your hands and you identify with a blue collared industry, even though I'm in the insurance world, I don't see myself as a white collar guy. When I built my first practice in Dallas, I had everything from plastic surgeons, some big, huge companies, 10,000 employee plus companies, nationwide companies, and gas stations. I mean, like you name it, we did it. And I never wanted to niche myself out. I never wanted to say, I'm just going to go after this. Although I trained people, I trained about 1,000 people in my lifetime. About 1,000 people is how many people I've trained, either from the restaurant industry or the insurance industry. And in the insurance industry, I always told every single one of them, find a niche, perfect that niche, you know how to speak their language, and then, show them how the products work for their industry. But for me, because I was so diverse, I had businesses in every industry. I never wanted anybody to look at that and go, oh, he doesn't understand how to do insurance for the telecom industry because he's a skilled trades guy, right? And so, what am I going to give up my 5,000 man company for the telecom, industry because I love plumbing and HVAC and electricians? No way, right? I'm just not gonna sabotage myself like that. But then again, when I went back to my content purposes and I laid out my strategy for 2019, 2020, and I said, what is it that I want to focus on? Because as a consultant, and that's kind of where I've moved my business into, is it's no longer as much in the everyday managing of healthcare. It's going into businesses and actually consulting for them, looking over their plans and saying, okay, here's all the things that are wrong with your plan. Here's all the things you need to change for that. You can have it two ways. You can have it done for you or do it yourself. Which would you like? You like your broker? You want to keep everything the way it is? Great, no problem. I'll build a plan for you, and here you go. Go give it to your broker and tell them to implement it, right? Or you don't have a broker or need a different broker or whatever it is, no problem. We'll do it for you, and then we'll take them in-house. We're pretty selective on that group. And so, when I looked back at it and I said, how am I going to make this work? I had to pick a niche. And my niche was the industry I know the best. It's a skilled trade industry. I've got tons of construction companies. I've got, plumbing, HVAC, electrical companies. Why would I, segregate just because I have one or two other industry type companies that I kept? And they know what my passion and development is. So that's why I got pretty vocal on it. I said, pick a topic and go with it. And when your book came out, and we talked about it before it came out, I was like, this is so great. This is awesome. I love it. I love the idea of it. I love where the trades are going. I understand, from my dad and from what he told me about it, I just saw it as an avenue to dig in and have enough to keep going with it. It's not something that's going to go away. Like, right. I could jump on something else and pick that niche out. But the way that I see Amazon taking over the world, the way that we see the world as we know it is changing, right? And so this industry is not going anywhere. And so it was the one that I wanted to tag to.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's smart too. I mean, because you're right, it's not going anywhere. Especially, you hear a lot about AI technology, robotics, and
Sure.
things like that, customer service jobs going away, and, just automation basically taking over everything. But it can't really happen to the scale that we think it can, within this skilled trades industry. You're just not going to be able to get technology to do the same exact thing that blue collar hands can do.
Sure.
So that's interesting. It's a good answer.
And even with the AI and the automation, that stuff is supposed to just be used to get you to that person that's going to be able to hand it off to them, where we're not sending out information that we don't need to be doing that can be done by a computer, right? Just like a calculator, right?
Exactly.
Do I need to know how to do long division anymore? No, I have a calculator, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, right? I mean, that's what some people think. That's an unfortunate thing, is that people don't want to write a letter anymore. Why? It's faster to type it and email it to somebody than to handwrite it, put it in an envelope, leave my house, go put it in the mailbox with a stamp on it that I have to pay for to send it to somebody. I'm sorry, an email is much faster. And a text is even faster than that, because 98% open rate. Somebody's going to read it immediately, right?
Yeah.
So when we get to the automation, even robots, somebody's going to have to work on the robots, right? I mean, it's just so silly, right?
Yeah.
Eventually machines are going to take over the world and kill us all, right? I'm hoping it's not in the next couple hundred years, right?
Yeah, right. No, but it's a good point, and that's what I always say is that, hey, you know what? Somebody's got to fix these robots. So, there's going to be tradespeople here long after every other white collar industry is gone.
Sure. And let's just talk about getting on a roof. Are you going to have a drone pick this robot up and go put it on the roof? Are you going to trust a 700-pound robot climbing up those stairs, falls off and kills somebody? Like, think of the insurance liability on that alone, right? I mean, it's got a long way. It's got a long way to go.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So if there's one thing that you could say to the listeners about choosing a career in the trades, what would that be?
Stop caring what other people think. I think that's probably the most important piece. If you're not feeling judged by anybody else and you're happy, right, it's a lot easier to make decisions about the trades. And, just think about how many parents care about what happens to their child. I know I do all the time, right? How my kid acts is a reflection on how I'm parenting them. And so if my kid doesn't go to college, which we've told every one of our children that they have to go into the trades when they graduate to learn a skill. And then, if they get a college scholarship so it's going to pay their full way, we're fine with that. My son wants to be a football player. My other son wants to be a cross-country runner. If they get collegiately, to go do that, great. But if it's just because that's my next step, who knows? Maybe they're rocket scientists by that point. But from where we see it right now, it could possibly happen. But if it doesn't, they're not going to just go to college to go figure it out. They're going to go into the trade industry and figure out whatever makes them happy. And they're going to, I am hoping in the next, 5 years, that's when my 13-year-old turns 18, that there are enough apprenticeship programs out there that he can either go to a West Mech or a school where he can go see, hey, what's HVAC look like? What's electrical look like? What's plumbing look like? And I already show him a little bit of stuff, but, I'm not building a house anymore, right? I learned a lot that way. But, to go see what they like. And so I just encourage anybody that's listening to that to tell their kids that. And if there are, listeners on here that are in middle school and high school, think about exactly what it is that you're wanting to do. And if you don't know without a shadow of a doubt that you want to go be a veterinarian or you want to go be a doctor or a lawyer or a CEO of a Fortune 500 company where you're going to, Ivy League school because that's what it takes, and you're reading 60 books a year already. I mean, like all of that stuff, right? And you're just not really sure. I just want to go work at a company and, play video games on the weekend. Look really hard at this because it's going to change. This industry is going to change a lot, especially with the next generation that comes into it. And I think that companies are going to evolve and change. And kind of like what you've talked about with, when you have this mass exodus of baby boomers, and you've got millennial, Gen X, and then some Gen Ys are already starting to come in, right? You've got some changes that are going to come up. They're going to want the Uber style of work. I want to work, when I want to work. There's somebody that's actually creating that app right now. You've got people that want to work 20 hours a week. Then you've got other people the same age, same generation, that want to work 90 hours a week. They love it so much they just want to keep doing it. And so, again, when we look at our generational type pieces, let's stop classifying people, right? Maybe the boomers and the builders, it worked for them. I don't think it did. You look at a big group of boomers that don't act like the other boomers, right? When you look at the Generation X, which is the smaller generation, they act completely different, right? And then you've got millennials who, there's two classifications of that. There's the group of millennials that are doing what everybody told them to do, where they're buying homes and having kids and went to college. They're doing it like 3 years later than everybody told them to, but they're doing it finally. And then you've got the other group that aren't, that are going against the status quo. We're not going to be fed this. I think that when you get the Gen Z, and kind of what I've read on it, is and understood of it is they're going to have 3 or 4 groups of kids that come out. They're going to be completely different. And a 20-year gap is too long now with the advancement of technology to look at generations. You can't look at a millennial generation and just say, this is who you are, right? And the people that hate millennials the most are millennials. Right? Other millennials, right? It's like, because, and it's the negative side. Instead of enhancing the positives, we always talk about the downside of the millennials, and then we'll talk about the downside of the Generation Z because, we got it so much, we're going to put it on them, right? And the boomers, got it so much from the builders. They were the generation that told that they were going to waste away America. Yep. They created consumerism for the boomers. That's how America was built. Patrick David talks about it in his book, The Greatest Storm. Every company said, how do we build our company? We sell whatever the boomers want, right? Who were the biggest companies whenever the boomers were babies? Pampers, Gerber, toys, Mattel, right? Then what happened? What came next? Oh, school systems. They had to go to school. So then the construction industry boomed. Then what happened? Okay, kids got to go to college. College boomed, right? Well, actually, sorry, Ford Mustang came out, right, with the Mustang because nobody wanted to drive the station wagon. They wanted a sports car. So the boomers, 1964, right, came out with Ford Mustang, right? You've got all of these things as the generations were going along. They thought they could do that with the millennials, and you just can't.
Good answer. Good answer, man. No, that I think that'll help a lot of our listeners too, kind of put things into perspective and understand the timeline and generationally, why certain generations are looked at in certain ways because there's different groups, So that was a very, very good explanation, for that. So thank you. Last question.
Okay.
Personally, because I talk about this a lot, and it's basically my basis for everything. How do you personally define success, and how have the trades helped you, or how are they helping you to achieve that?
Success has changed for me, and it's like I've lived 3 lives. When I was younger, it was all about money. That's all I cared about. I remember freshman year talking with a guy, and I was like, man, we're going to pull up when we're 19 or BMWs and Mercedes, and we're going to rule everything. And, then reality hit. And it took a lot of work to get that Mercedes or that BMW, but I bought one, and I bought one at age 20. and paid for it myself. Put the big rims on it and the TVs in the back. I mean, I had a nice car, right? And I just watched it devalue every year. And so money was my goal in the beginning, and then I switched into the insurance industry because I didn't care about the money as much anymore. I went from making a really, really high six-figure income to where everything was paid for, by the way. You know, they paid for your car and paid for, you know, all kinds of stuff, to making like 30 grand a year my first year in the insurance industry. Like, you don't make anything your first year because insurance is all about building your book, right? And your first year, you kill them what you eat. And I wasn't very good. And so it was rough. You know, it was really rough. And year two got better. I had doubled my income, and I was like, okay, I can see the trend. If I do this 4 more years, I'm back to where I was. And so, you know, it was one of those situations where I sat back and I go, okay, I can see the how this is going. And at year 3, it just exploded and did way more than double. And so, yeah, so, you know, money was my success factor. And then it became, okay, money is going to come when I make people happy and I do the right thing. And so, I went with the Zig Ziglar approach, which is if you make enough people happy, you'll make yourself happy, right? Or if you help enough people, you'll get what they want, you'll get what you want, right? And so, you know, I went all in on my family. Like, I cared more about spending time with my family than going out and selling another company. And you know who I met at those places? The owners of those HVAC and plumbing companies that were with their kids on the sports fields and things like that. And so it just kind of continued to grow that way. So yeah, success now for me is more charity. So I went money for the first till 26-ish, I guess. And then from about 26 to 30-ish, 32, it was about aspiration of being acknowledged. I was in an industry in the insurance world where I got a lot of acknowledgement. I called it the God complex, where everybody wanted to know me and everybody wanted to talk to me and hear what I had to say. And they put me on stages and made me speak in front of hundreds of people and, you know, give understanding of what I did differently than everybody else. And then, you know, that all went away, and I looked at this wall of just all these trophies that I had, you know, had all these accomplishments, and my wife was like, you just need to get rid of all that stuff, and just literally pulled up the trash can, just dumped all of this, you know, years worth of awards away. And so yeah, now it's a charity driven focus. I care more about third world countries than I do, you know, about how I'm going to make the next dollar. Right. So I'm pretty heavily involved in that whole world, the whole nonprofit world. And success to me is that's what's making me happy right now. It's making me happy. And I'm showing companies how to partner with nonprofits to drive funds to the nonprofits so that they can go do these things. And so that's been really fun. So if you look at how do I recruit new employees, and you look at any statistics on millennials and Generation Z, they care about what's going on in the world. And so if they care about what's going on in the world and your company is tied to a third world relief fund that's helping that world with a portion of your profits or a portion of your transaction fee, or we donate our commission to the nonprofit of People's Choices, that's the different ways that we get involved with it, then they get to use that as their platform, right? And they're like, hey, we've got, a village in Africa that we're supporting, and we do it through this way. And so it's just that other thing to go, okay, it's not just about me growing my company. I'm not just sitting in my own little bubble, in my own silo, growing it, not showing anybody else what we're doing. I'm actually looking outside of just my local. I'm going global. It was something I learned at Chili's. At Chili's, they had a statement, thinking globally, acting locally, right? And so it was just this idea, if we thought globally, then act locally, everything would kind of work out. And so that's kind of how I kind of took that approach to it. So success to me is happiness for me and my family, but by helping other people become happy as well.
Good answer.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important answer too, because you had mentioned that success for you had changed over the years, as it does, I think, for everybody.
Sure.
But the people that I specifically try to reach with what I'm talking about, what I'm saying, high school students, and things like that, it's a hard message to get across, because you want what you want when you want it.
Sure.
And, same thing, when I was in high school, money, money, money. Show me the money. How can I get it? How can I walk down those red carpets? How can I meet the mythical people that
Sure.
everybody admires, and and that's it. But again, over the years, success will change. The definition of success will change for everybody involved, and which is just another reason why I love pushing the trade so much, because no matter how you define it, this is one industry that can give it to you in any avenue that you so choose.
Yeah.
So anyway, with that being said, Anthony, before we wrap it up, why don't you go ahead and let people know where they can find you, and then we'll get it going.
So currently, you could probably find me on LinkedIn the quickest. I don't have just Anthony Pacheco. You'll find me. I don't push a ton of social media. I'm heavily on LinkedIn, and then for my charity businesses, I've got some Facebook pages and things like that. But for the most part, for who I am, LinkedIn's probably the easiest way to find me. I'm on Twitter, I'm on all these other things, but it's more of a just playing around, seeing how the platforms work. So you're not going to catch any of my content there, but so LinkedIn for sure.
Okay. Great. Well, Anthony, thanks again. Appreciate your time today. And
Thanks for having me on.
yeah, hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah, sounds great.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.